In this part 4 of the series, I'm going to explain you how to create a simple OData service which is going to expose the data that we needed in the front end. So previously what we have done is that we have created our component, and inside the component we have instantiated our root view. Then within the root view I have just displayed my master page in the master section. So this is basically what we have done. Now inside this master page I wanted to display some content. So in order to expose the content from my backend system, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a simple gateway service with which I'm going to expose the data. So I have just logged into my SAP NetWeaver system where I'm going to create the gateway service. So before I get started with the gateway service, I'll just show you the list of tables which I'm going to use for the purpose of displaying the content. So I'm going to this transaction S11 where you can search for this table with SNWD star, where you'll be able to get the different tables which has been given by SAP for demonstrational purposes. So this is a demo table which contains all the sales order information and it relevant information which I'm going to make use for the purpose of displaying it content. Okay, so you can see this table called SNWD underscore SO. So SNWD stands for SAP NetWeaver demo, where you can see this demo tables. So I have just opened this SO table where you can see the sales order header information has been displayed. So likewise, you'll be able to see this another table called SNWD underscore SO underscore I, with which you can see the item information. So what you can probably do is that you can do a query from this table and then you can see the header and item details. Or alternatively, what I'm going to make use of here to simplify the development processes, SAP has also given us with a set of BAPIs which can be used which can be used for the purpose of displaying the sales order information. So there is BAPI called BAPI underscore EPM underscore SO underscore get list, with which I am going to display this information. Sorry, I got stuck here. So I'm just going to make use of this function module with which I'm going to display the sales order information. So here I'm just going to specify this maximum row to avoid the time, and I wanted only 10 records. So executing this, it will gives me this sales order header information over here, and then it gives me this sales order item data over here. So probably I'm going to make use of the same structure, because if you look at this, we are going to make use of some different BAPIs which are available inside this for each and every action. And so these are some of the methods which are going functions that we are going to make use of, and they all have this same structure. So whatever the header information that I wanted to expose, I'm going to expose it as this structure, and whatever is the item information that I wanted to expose, I'm going to expose it with this particular structure. So if you look at this header structure, it is going to give you the information on what is the sales order header, what is the status of it, what is the gross amount, who is the buyer, when it has been changed, what are the note attached to it, what is the net amount, and so on. So you also see this billing status, delivery status, life cycle status, the overall status, and so on. So I'm just going to make use of this structure, and by using this function model, I'm going to expose my data as a OData service. So to build this OData service, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to this transaction called as SCGW, where it's a gateway builder transaction where we are going to develop our gateway service. So what I will do is that I will create a new project, and I'm going to name this project as the sales order, and I just given the demo as sales description as sales order, and I'll put it in a local object. So where a gateway project has been created for me. And in this project, there are 4 different sections which we'll be handling one after another. So the first section is our data model. So this data model, it contains the different entities, entity types, and entity sets that we are going to define. And it also has this properties as well, like in this entity, what is going to be this. So before we go forward, you need to be familiar with these terms, like what is an entity, what is an entity type, and what is an entity set. So entity is nothing but a semantic object which displays an information about a certain things. For example, you can consider a sales order as a entity, where a sales order is going to display the information about the sales order and also its relevant other objects, like what is the product, what is the description of it, and so on. So entity includes all the information related to the sales order. It's just a semantic information. Whereas when you say entity type, it's the technical details of it, like what are the information that you're going to display, like sales order ID, status, item number, or product ID, or let's say gross amount. So the technical details of it, like what is the structure in which you are exposing this entity information, is going to be your entity type. And entity sets, in the sense, it's nothing but a collection of entities, where it's not just one sales order, you're going to group them 10, 20 sales order together. That what you're going to call it as an entity set. So inside a data model, you're going to define that what is the entity and what is it corresponding entity type and what are the entity sets. So in this way, you define that this is the information that I'm going to expose and this is the type in which I'm going to expose the information. And if you wanted a collection of it, you make use of this entity set. So inside this data model, we have this entity type and entity sets. So association is something that we will discuss later on, but for now, I'm just going to create my entity type and then entity sets. So I can rather create it individually, like by right clicking on this, and then I can define it. Or what I'm going to do is, it's loading. Uh, so what I'm going to do is I can just right click on this and then I can import some structure with which I can create it. So now we know that we already have seen a structure which I can make use of it to create the header information. So I'm just going to make use of this DDIC structure, where that structure would be this BAPI underscore EPM underscore SO underscore header, which has the sales order ID created by information, buyer ID, buyer name, currency code, gross amount, and so on. So I'm going to name this entity as a sales order. And this is going to be a simple type, whereas whenever it has a deep structure, you specify it as a complex type. So here is the ABAP structure which I wanted to create the entity. And I have also clicked on this checkbox indicating that this create the default entity set as well, which means that it will append a name set to it and it will create an entity set also by default. Whereas whatever I'm defining here is an entity type, which indicates that what are the structure in which I'm going to define the data. So I'm going to define the data in this structure. I click on next. So I define that I specify that I wanted to include all the fields from the structure as a part of the service. I click on next, where I'm going to specify that what is the key field. So I indicate that the sales order ID is the key field and I click on finish. Now this step would create me a entity type and also an entity set. So the entity type name is going to be sales order, whereas the entity set name would be sales order set, which you can see over here. So sales order is created and sales order set entity set is also been created. If you expand this, you can see this list of properties. So entity type basically defines what are the properties that is going to expose as a part of this service. So here are these are the information which I'm going to expose it. And if you see here, the name that is provided over here will be different here, as the system does not take this underscore. So it will just merge it and it will create this with this name. So whenever I'm going to use it in the gateway, I'm just going to use this name as the property values. So we have created our entity type. The next step is our service implementation, where in this entity set, so you can see this basic CRUD operations like creating the data, deleting the data, or reading this information, or reading multiple information, or updating the value. So I can just right click on this and I can implement this action one after another by mapping it to a data source. Or what I can do is that I'm going to make use of this red button called as a generate runtime object, which will generate me all the necessary classes and methods which are required, within which I'm going to go inside and I'm going to write my logic. So what I will do is I'm just going to click on this generate object in order to generate all the required objects that are needed for me. So based upon the entity type that I have created, system is going to create me the necessary objects. So it basically creates a couple of classes called one with the name DPC and other with the name MPC. So what this basically refers is DPC stands for data provider class and MPC stands for model provider class. And this is responsible for the metadata of your application, and this is the actual data provider class where you're going to define that what is the data that you wanted to expose. Now here you can also see that this class comes with this extension class, whereas we are always supposed to write our logic inside this extension class. The reason is being that, let's say for example, now my entity type contains this number of fields. So the system will provide me this data provider class, and it has also provided me this data provider extension class. So the way it has been implemented is that whatever the entity type that I have specified over here, that entity type will be referenced over here, and from this by inheriting this class, we implement the actual logic over here. The reason why we are going to implement it in this particular way is that later on, if I wanted to come over here and if I wanted to say this, I wanted to add this net amount field. So whenever I define this net amount field, what the system will do is that it will regenerate all the classes. Suppose if I'm writing the logic over here, what would happen is that this DPC class will be regenerated because this is the one that is having the actual reference to this entity model. So to include this net amount in this reference, it has to regenerate this class, which will end up losing all your application logic. So because of this reason, we don't write our logic over here. We write our logic over here because here there is no actual dependency between this and this, because this DPC extension class is only depending on this. So whenever you are going to do some modification here, this class will get regenerated. So by the rule of inheritance, whatever is available in the superclass will be available by directly in the subclass as well. So if I add a field over here or if I remove the field over here, that will automatically reflect over here. So I'll just have to adjust the logic where I do not have to re-implement it again. My logic will not be lost by regenerating this particular class. So it creates this couple of classes, and it also create a model as well as the service which will be later on registering to expose the data. So for now, I just click on OK, and whatever the object that are generated, I'm going to put it in a local object. So here in the runtime object, you could see what are the different list of classes that has been generated. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take this dpc class where I'm going to implement the logic to expose the information. So I go to this transaction, and here I display this. And here you could see that in the methods, whatever the entity type that I have defined for that particular entity type, the system would have created these 5 different methods which will help me implement this CRUD operations, where I have this method get entity set or update entity to update the value, delete entity to delete the value, create entity to insert a new record. So whenever I wanted to do a specific action in that particular sales order, I can implement this method. So now what I basically wanted to do is I wanted to expose this information where I wanted to um, display the list of sales order. So I will go to this get entity set method and I will implement this. And if you see here, when I gone inside this method, the name of the class has changed to ZCL sales order underscore DPC, because this method is actually coming from the sales order super class. So if I do a change over here and if I write a logic, that logic which I'm implementing will be directly implemented in the Z sales order DPC class and not on the extension class. So to implement it on the extension class, I'm going to redefine this method here. So, and I'm going to write this logic in the redefined method so that when I later on adjust my entity, I'm not going to lose this implemented logic. So I'm just going to implement my logic over here. And here, if you check the signature, you can see the list of importing parameters that are coming. What is the entity name? What is the entity set name? What are the filter condition that has been specified? What are the key fields that has been specified? In which order I wanted to display this information, and so on. And you can also see this exporting parameter et underscore entity set, which is of type the same sales order entity which we have defined. So which is of type this. So this is the type of structure which I'm going to expose this information. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to make use of this function module which will give us this data, which is this. So I'm going to call this function module and I'm going to get the data from here. Maximum row is going to be, let's say for example, I'm just going to put this maximum row to 10. Let's see in which structure it gets the value. So I already have this here. So maximum row is going to be of this particular type, has to be given in this particular type. and inside this you can see that it is a structure which has this maximum BAPI maximum row. So I'll create a structure over here, data ls underscore maximum row is of type this. So here I'm going to specify this ls underscore maximum row hyphen BAPI maximum row is going to be 10. So I just give that component value and I specify here as ls underscore max underscore row. Then whatever is the header data that has been written, I'm going to put that header data directly into this entity set. I know this will be supported because we are using this exact same structure. So I have just um, implemented this logic for this get entity set method. So we will implement the other methods as and when it is required for us. So for now, what I will do is that the next step that I would do is that I wanted to expose this service. So in order to expose the service, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to the service maintenance and I'm going to register my service over here. So I'll go over here and you can see that the registration status is empty. So I'm going to click on register and this is going to ask me in which system you wanted to register it. So I'll just put register the service in a local object and I will save it. So now I'm going to click on this SAP Gateway Client to test this service. So when I click on this, it is going to open up in a new system, in a new window, sorry. So here you could see that my service URL is available over here, where by default it is pointing to this service which has been generated as a part of that gateway project. So I'm going to click on execute. So this will give me what are the entities that are available. So this entity set that are available is sales order set. So if I wanted to see this data in the sales order set, what I'm going to do is that I can just copy this and I can paste it in the URL. Or if you wanted to see it, you can also click on this entity set over here, which will list you out the different entity set. You can say which is the entity that you wanted to see and you can see this. So you click on this, it is going to execute that particular method. It is going to get the data and it is going to display it over here. So I will just put a breakpoint there so that you can see this. So when I execute this, since I'm trying to read all the information, it is going to go to this get entity set method, which gives you all the information, where from this function module, we are going to get this data. So I'm just getting this 10 row of header information and I'm going to give it to the exporting parameter. So the gateway system will take care of converting it to the OData and it will display it over here. If you're finding it difficult to understand this XML, then what I can probably do is you can click on this data explorer, which will format and display your values. So here you can see that this sales order number, for this sales order number, what is the actual value which is available over here. So for now, we have created a simple gateway service which is going to expose this information, and we have also registered this service as well to expose this information. So now that our gateway service is available, next step what we will do is that we will move on to our SAP UI5 application, where we are going to consume this data and we are going to display this information in our master page. So in the next session we will continue with that.